Hi there, everybody. This is Ashley with Marshflower Studio. For the video today, I am going to be showing you guys a variation of my little T-Rex. So this one is the new version where we make his little arms and legs as bobble stitches as we go, and we don't make them separate and then sew them on later. So everything is very similar in terms of how you make him to the original pattern, but this one does take a little less time because you're not making those 4 pieces separately and then sewing them on. They're just on there and then you're done. So it's an option. I'm going to work through it really quickly so that you guys can kind of see what that difference is in the pattern. There is an extra row, but it doesn't really change his size. The yarn that I used for this one is a number 4 worsted weight yarn and my 4mm hook here. If you've worked with different brands of yarn before, you've probably noticed that some of them, even though they say they're a number 4 worsted weight, feel a little thicker, and some feel thinner. And it's really just, you know, up to the brand. I know there are some specifications to classify all these different kinds of yarn and their thickness. But if you know what I'm talking about, you know. So this one is a little bit thicker, so he turned out a little larger than some of my other ones have, but he's still a very cute little tiny T-Rex, and it's very much still keychain size. I do a lot of little creations like this that I consider keychain size. Obviously, they're not tiny little things, you know, little tiny charms. I use them, and a lot of people that I know that have gotten them from me use them on zipper pulls. I have a couple hanging on my diaper bag in different spots. And a lot of the times I will put them, you know, on the handle or on the strap instead of on an actual zipper or on keys, just because they're cute and super fun, and the kids obviously like to just play with them. So not having them open the zipper and take everything out of the pocket is a big plus for me. They do stand up pretty well as far as being used for zipper pulls. I typically use my 4mm hook when I am doing anything I consider keychain size, just because it makes those stitches a little bit tighter and they tend to hold up longer. When I use my 5mm hook, they tended to kind of stretch out faster, and you could see stuffing in between the stitches as they got used over time. So that's why I use the 4mm hook. You can use any yarn size, hook size that you are comfortable with. If you want to make him a little bit bigger and use a bulky yarn, just use a corresponding hook that'll work with that yarn. So we'll get started on making this little guy with the bobble arms and legs so that you guys can hopefully make one of these as well. So for this guy, we're going to start with a chain, and we're doing a chain 6. And these yarns that I have out here today are from Hobby Lobby. You know, I love this yarn. So we have Paint Party, and then the teal that I'm using is Peacock. So Paint Party, Peacock, and then I'm actually going to be using Limelight as well in just a few minutes. So we got our slip knot. We're going to have our chain 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. All right, and then in the second chain from the hook, we're going to start doing our single crochets, and we're going to have 4 of them. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. You should have 1 more back here. And in this one, we're going to put 3 single crochets. Okay. So 1, 2, and 3. And it kind of curves around that end. All right. Now we're going to have 3 single crochets going up the back side of that starter chain. There's 1, 2, 3. And then in this last spot, we're going to do a double. Not a double. We're going to do 2 single crochets. So an increase. Okay. All right, for our next row, we're going to start with an increase. So there's 1 and 2. We're going to have 3 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3. We're going to have 3 increases. So that's 6 stitches total. So here's our first one, 1 and 2. Our second one, 1 and 2, and our third one, 1 and 2. All right, and we're gonna have 3 single crochets again. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 increases. So there's 1 and 2. And then our second one, 1 and 2. All right, so for our next row, we're just going to have 18 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. If at any point I'm working too fast, just hit the pause button, and once you're kind of caught up to the same point, you know, hit play. That's the great thing about the video tutorials. It's not a live feed where you're not ever going to see it again if you miss something. So work at your own pace. It's not a race. Once you kind of get the hang of the pattern, it'll definitely go faster for any additional ones that you want to make. But keep in mind, the pause button is there for a reason. All right, for our next row, we're going to start with 6 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to have 3 decreases. So this is something I always have to kind of remember to explain as I go. For anyone that's new to crochet or new to my videos, the decreases, we're going under the front loop only of the next 2 stitches. We're going to grab some yarn, pull it back underneath both of those 2. So we have our 2 loops like we have a normal single crochet, yarn over and pull through both. Okay, this is the way that I do decreases. There are other ways to do decreases. Whichever way you're most comfortable with is completely fine. Okay, as long as you're doing a decrease in the same spot of the pattern, you're good. All right, so there's my 3 decreases and then 6 more single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. In our next row, we're going to start with 4 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 3 decreases. So again, we're going under the front loop only of those next 2 stitches. That was 1, there's 2, and 3, and then 5 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And I don't typically put safety eyes in these little guys, but if you want to put the safety eyes in there, I recommend doing it at this point and kind of putting them between rows 2 and 3, and you can just kind of gauge where you want them to be as far as, you know, forward or back. If you want them farther down the side of the head, just keep in mind, you know, this is the head. So bottom of the chin, top of the head, you know, you want to kind of get them right in this area here. So if you want to get that put in, hit pause and then jump back in when you're done with that part. All right, so our next row is 12 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, so I'm going to take my little yarn tail here, kind of tuck it up in that nose area so it's not just flopping around in my way. Okay, sorry about that. In our next row, we're going to have 3 single crochets and an increase, and this is going to take our row count out to 15. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then our increase is 4 and 5. We have 6, 7, 8, our increase is 9 and 10, and then we have 11, 12, 13, and our increase is 14, 15. All right, in our next row, we're going to have 4 single crochets and then an increase, and this kind of takes us out to 18 stitches for this row. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. Then our increase is 5 and 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, and our increase is 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, Our increase is 17, 18. All right. So in our next row, this is where we add a row to put in the arms. And adding the extra row made it a lot more simple, because in the original pattern, the next row would be an increase of 2 and then our increase, so it would take us out to 24. And I found that trying to do the bobble stitch in that row was just really kind of complicated. So I added an extra row just to add in the arms, and then we continue on with the pattern from there. So for our arm row, we're going to do 7 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And with the arms and the legs, depending on your tension, your yarn, whether you do yarn over or yarn under, you may need to adjust which stitch your arms and legs go into. So if you have done 7 single crochets for this row and your arm is going to be like over here, add 1 or 2 to get it where it's a little bit more just off center of the front. Okay. And with me, this is where, you know, my 7 and then my bobble stitch comes in right where I would like it to be. But I had a friend of mine do this pattern as well. And the 7 for her was like a little too centered on the body. So then it would have put her left arm kind of off to the side and wonky. So she had to take out a stitch. Actually, she had to take out 2 to get more to this like off-centered part of the front. But like I said, it's all about your yarn over, yarn under, your tension, how much your work kind of rotates and twists as you go. But it's not that complicated to just make the adjustment, and then when you get back to your starting point, you may have a different, you know, stitch count on this side getting back to that point. So if you're worried about making sure you're not going over your stitches for the row count, just pop a little stitch marker in your stitches where your row begins. This is one of those times when those large bobby pins really come in handy, because it's super easy to just slip on there and slip out when you're done figuring everything out. But I've got my 7. I'm going to do my Okay, sorry about that. We do my 5 double crochet bobble. And I found a really good explanation of the difference between the bobble, the popcorn, and the puff that I'm going to put in another video, because I didn't realize that there was a difference for a really long time. So there's a difference depending on what you want your little piece here to look like. You can do any of them. All right, so there's my first. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so I've got my original loop, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 loops in addition to that. So we'll yarn over and pull through all of them, and then I always do just a little chain 1 to kind of tie that all together there. To me, it helps make that poof actually poof. So then we'll do 2 single crochets, and then we're going to do another bubble. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I can start to get a little hard to get all of them in that one stitch, depending on your yarn thickness and hook size. Then just make sure that your next stitch is actually where you're going and it didn't get covered up by your bobble. All right. So after that bobble, if you're in the same kind of spot as I am, you're having 7 more sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. 7 more single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so if you're like me, right now these little bobbles are inside out. That's just how they tend to go whenever I make them. And I'm going to do another row before I push them out to the front, because it just seems to make accessing these stitches here a little easier. But again, that's a personal preference thing. All right, so at this point, we're going to do our row where we have 2 single crochets and an increase, and it increases our stitch count, our row count, to 24. So 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And where you've got your bobble and then your chain 1, you only want to use one of these stitches, okay? I usually use the chain 1 area just to draw that bobble even more tight and make it really pop out the front. Okay, so now I'll just push these little guys out, and you've got your 2 little T-Rex arms kind of built in. All right. So our next row is going to be just 24 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay, so at this point, you can see how my starting stitch has moved from like directly behind the head, and it's like over one. Okay, and for this next row, we want to make sure that we're lined up like with the very middle of the back. So I typically have to add one single crochet here, and then that's just my new starting stitch from here out. So with this row, I will obviously make sure you're lined up with the middle of the back, and then you're going to chain 5. So we're adding a tail to this row, and we're adding the bottom feet. Okay, so we're going to do a chain 5 for the tail. Oop, I gotta sneeze. Just kidding. All right, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so then we will turn. You're going to skip that first stitch right at your hook, go into the second one with your single crochet, and then we're going to have 3 more to make our way back down this chain, so 4 total. Okay, and then this next step is not 100% necessary, but I do it because it makes this look better when it's finished. I'm going to go into this, so we have our first kind of stitch from where we started our chain. I'm going to go into that same hole and pull up a loop, and then go into the next one over and create a little decrease right here, because otherwise you'll end up with like a little bit of a hole or gap in between the tail and then continuing on with the next row. So I just do this little decrease here, and then you don't end up with that gap. Okay, if you just want to start your next single crochet and not do a decrease, that's totally fine. It's not going to mess up your count. So now we're going to have 6 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this is one of those areas again, you want your legs to kind of line up centered in the front of the body. And right now with this yarn, I am over here on the side. I don't want my foot to be way over here. I want it to be closer to underneath the arm. So I'm going to go ahead and add an extra single crochet and then do my foot bobble. Okay. And I'm going to do the same 5 that I did with the top arms. If you wanted to have your feet a little bigger, you could make it a 6 or a 7 double crochet bobble. But that's, you know, up to you. It doesn't, again, change your stitch count as far as moving forward with the pattern, as long as they're all in that same clump together. Again, we'll pull through all and then do our little chain there. And then we're going to do between 2 and 4 single crochets to get across that belly space, and then do your other foot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull through all, do our little chain. And then we're going to single crochet our way back to that starting point at the bottom of the tail. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm counting that first one as 1 for the next row. Okay. So in this row, we're going to have quite a few decreases. We're going to start with 3 single crochets, kind of moving our way back up that tail. And then we're going to have a decrease up here on the end of the tail. We're going to have another decrease coming up the side of the tail. And then 1, 2 single crochets, and then we're going to do 6 as we work along the side here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we're going to have quite a few decreases to pull this kind of bottom tummy back in. So, and again, with that bobble, you've got your long stitch and then your chain, but you only want to use one of these. So there's 1 decrease. There's 2. 3. 4. 5. And 6. So 6 decreases, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. So then we move on to 3 decreases to kind of finish closing up this tail here. One, 2, 3, and then 2 and decrease all the way back around to the start. So 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, and decrease. All right, so pop these little feet out down here. And if you wanted to have your arms or your legs be farther out to the sides, you can totally just shift them out to where you want them to be. All right. So at this point, I'm going to take a little pause and stuff him a bit. Make sure you get some up in the head and all the way up the nose. Got his body nice and stuffed. Don't forget to try to get a little bit in that tail. Well, it's tiny, but getting a little bit of stuffing in there definitely helps with the shape. All right. So at this point, we're just going to decrease until the bottom is closed in. All right. So I've got a nice small hole here. Cut our yarn, and we'll do our invisible close. And for those of you that haven't done this before, haven't seen it, we're going to go around this little circle. We're going to do the front loop only. We're going to go from the outside towards the inside, under just that top front loop, from outside to inside, all the way around. Once we're all the way around, just pull that tight, and it creates this nice little finished behind here. Okay, nice and smooth and neat. Okay, so that is our little dino with his built-in bobble arms and legs. Yay! And I'm going to add some spikes to this guy, just because using lots of different colors definitely attracts more attention. So you can just surface crochet a little line of spikes from his head down his back. I kind of tend to just make a chain because it's less frustrating for me. So I'm going to do a chain, depending on the size of your dinosaur and how long you want your little spikes to go. You're looking at between 10 and 16. So it's something that you're going to need to just kind of do and measure as you go to make sure that it's going to fit the length that you want it to be. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's see how that looks. All right, so that goes from the tip of his tail up the back of his head. I want it to come onto the top some. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Go ahead and do 16. So that gives me almost to the tip of his nose, down his head all the way to the tip of his tail. All right. So then we will turn and work our way back up the chain. So in the second chain from the hook, we're going to do 2 slip stitches. So slip, slip, and then we're going to do a picot stitch. So we're going to chain 3. We're going to slip stitch into that first chain of the picot, and then we will move on down with 2 more slips. 1, 2, and then we'll do another picot. 1, 2, 3. Do a slip stitch in that first chain, and then back to our main chain with 2 more slip stitches. This is our last picot. Do 1 last slip stitch back here. We'll fasten off. And just enough of a tail to help me sew this to the body. I'm going to use my bobby pins to help hold this thing in place. So we got the end down there. We'll get the front. Pinned up here. So if you wanted to have your spikes be not quite as big as these are, you can, obviously go with a lighter weight yarn and a smaller hook. It's just kind of one of those personal preference things. And again, a lot of the yarns that I typically use for my spikes is one of those thinner worsted weight yarns. So I don't usually have too much trouble with them being bigger. This is one of my firsts with this green as the spikes. Oh, all these little yarn tails are getting tangled up here. Alright, so we will just sew this right on. And once this whole thing is on, I'll bring the tail just stuffed through the body and then tie all these together before I tuck them back through. Or you can go back and kind of do a double layer of stitches all the way back down if you think that, you know, makes it more sturdy. It's up to you. But that is our little tiny T-Rex with the built-in bobble arms and legs. Has cute little spikes. So remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you like the videos. That way I know to keep making them. If you have anything you would like to see me make, let me know. And as long as it's not a copyrighted paid pattern, I'd be more than happy to make a video of it being made. Yeah. So if it's illegal for me to make a video of it, don't send it to me. I hope you guys enjoy this little guy, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy hooking, crochet nerds!